kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be here with a lovely audience here. And of course, thanks for being involved for making this possible. First, yes, we want to talk about Jade, but after talking about Jade, we should be answering a few questions and hope we can answer some of your queries about this mysterious stone that's been popular throughout the centuries. Let's see if I can work this first. Well, let me introduce myself. I'm with Lao Feng Xiang. I've been dealing in jade in Hong Kong for over 30 years. Now, most jades are actually built in Hong Kong. A lot of the carving, a lot of the slicing productions are actually done in Hong Kong. So if you actually want to buy jade, go to a more oriental store. Hong Kong is probably one of the best places for jade trading. You have extensive collections to choose from. We have a modest collection in our shop too, but comparing Hong Kong is nothing because prices can vary for jade. We'll talk about the prices later. But first we look at some of the factors that we have about jade. Now, what is jade? Jade is actually, these days, it's actually differentiated into two types. There's the jadeite jade and also the nephrite jade. Some of the members have asked me about questions which is higher price. We actually haven't had jade in China or even in Hong Kong since like 18th century. We're talking about jadeite jade. A lot of the green jade you see are actually jadeite. Most of the jewelry that you see in jewelry show these days are actually jadeite. Nephrite is another type of jade that is actually more common in museums. They come in bigger boulders and it's usually used as carvings. A lot of the pieces you see in museums are actually nephrites. So we'll go into the technical details of that later. But during the old days, only the royalties and the wealthies wear jade. But it's believed to have the mystical power of scaring away evil and also protect the wearer. It's very popular as a baby's gift because babies usually wear small pieces of jade. But nowadays everybody wears jade. Not all jade is expensive. You can get some very affordable pieces of jade that babies can wear. But for considering anything as a gemstone, you basically need three factors. The stone has to be beautiful, it has to be rare, and also it has to be durable. That actually applies to any stones. Jade is very beautiful, it's very translucent, it's very clear. Even the ones that has a more paler color is very translucent too. We call it a warm rock. Comparing with glass, when you touch glass, it probably feels cold. But when you touch jade, it's actually very, very warm because it actually conducts heat. 70% of all the jadeite is the green jade that's come out of Burma. And there's only about 12 places that produce jade. So jade is actually quite scarce. And durability. Jade is actually very, very tough. On most scales, jadeite is about 6.5 to 7. Nephrite is about 6 to 6.5. And this SG, the specific rating for jade, is about 3.5. It's a little bit heavier than diamonds, but it's close enough. But even though they're hard, they are quite brittle at times. If you drop a bangle on the floor, they will smash. It's very durable in such a sense that it doesn't scratch easily. You can wear it for 20 years without scratching. But then you do have a little bit more careful when you're wearing jade, making sure that they don't drop on the floor. They are what we call polycrystalline, multicrystalline. They are actually not like rubies or diamonds that comes out as one single crystal. They are actually a cluster of matrices of intertwining crystals. So you can see patches sometimes. That's why you see a lot of jade that comes in patches of different color due to these chemical compositions. And that is why every jade, the price is different. You have to look at the texture. We'll be talking about the criteria that contributes to the price of jade later. In Western Museum, in British Museum, in Metropolitan Museum here, you probably see a lot of paintings, you probably see a lot of sculptures as antiques. But in the Imperial Museums in China or even Taiwan, you'll be seeing a lot of jade carvings, a lot of big objects, a lot of jade ornaments that emperors and kings and royalties has been using. So it's been very popular in our history for a long time. Now let's talk about how jade is mined. As I said, most jade actually mined in Burma. They come in rough stones like this. So they're just a simple metamorphic rock. You don't really see what's inside. And once they produce, buyers will probably give them a bit of offer, like diamonds. And you have to take it home, and then you have to slice it. You really don't know what is inside the jade. So there's a term that we call jade gambling. Jade dealers actually give an offer according to experience and their own techniques. They will try to speculate what's inside the jade. It can be as green as this, they probably fetch a very high amount of money, or it can be as white as this, and then you can see the different tones, different patches of jade as well. Once they bought it, they probably slide it into the two cubes or even plates like these ones, and it will be sent to various workers in China or in Hong Kong. And it depends on the worker's speciality, who carve independent or ring or different sculptures. But these are the sizes that we usually slide them into. And there's an art in slicing the jade, because you actually have to try to maximum the yield of the jade. So it's like in diamonds, you find a diamond rough, you have to cut it and try to maximize the yield of the diamond. It works the same with jade. You have to try to make the whole piece as green as possible. So there's a lot of techniques in doing this type of things. Now, diamond prices, they pretty much standardized. Gold prices are standardized. But jade prices really varies a lot. You can get some very expensive ones with the whole piece that's being translucent. And you can get some that is lesser priced with grain lines like these. So that actually, you don't really know the actual price of a piece of jade once you've finished carving it. Now, so the basic procedure, you cut the stones, you bought it in auctions, probably in Burma, different parts of the world, and then you have to draw on the stones and how to slice it, and then you cut it, rinse it, you have to sand it, making it smooth, and further polishing. Finally, we have to do a wax layering on top of the jade. Now the wax layering is actually considered desirable. It actually protects the jade. As I said, jade is a multicrystalline crystal. So when you polish it, they actually have little pits on the surface of the stone. The little bits, if you polish it, that will fill up the little pits and actually makes the jade more translucent. That will be different with some of the treatments that we will talk about later as using resin. But wax polishing is actually considered desirable because it actually protects the jade. Jade is mined in different parts of the world. Myanmar, Burma is probably the biggest place to produce jade. You have USSR, Russia, that produce jadeite. Australia, New Zealand, they produce nephrite. Alaska, Canada, they also produce jade. And even Mexico, they produce jadeite. But still, 70% of all the valuable jadeite comes from Burma. But once the stone is bought, it's always shipped either to China or to Hong Kong for processing. Jade comes from many places. Most common is actually gray and grayish. Those are they're not as expensive ones. The most expensive one, the jadeite, comes from Burma. There are different terms for it. Burmese jade, imperial jade, apple green jade, iron jade. And a small quality is by other parts of the world. But because of the political situation in Myanmar, they've actually stopped producing jade for quite a few years. They only brought it back like a couple of years ago. So the jade price has actually shot up considerably. It has actually went up almost 10 times for the last decade. So if you have something back at home, it's probably worth a lot of money now. You can actually bring it to us and see if we can value it to you. Nephrite is more common. The deposit of nephrite jade is actually bigger. The border itself is actually bigger. Jadeite is usually smaller. That's why nephrite can actually use for carvings. we had a talk inside the museum that we have inside. Diamonds has been around, it's been recorded in history for like 100,000 years. The jade had actually been recorded for like 9,000 years in a lot of sculptures, in the sort of poems. The word jade is actually mentioned many, many times. But most of the antique pieces, the museum pieces that you see there, are actually nephrite. It wasn't, as I said, until the 18th century that we bring in green jadeite. It's popular these days. But before the 18th century, it's always nephrite. It's very difficult. There's always questions saying, oh, which is better, which is more expensive. Normally, jadeite is more expensive. They come in smaller pieces, they sell them in jewelries, but nephrite is actually more treasured because it's its history that goes with it. During the old days, Western society will value diamonds, rubies, golds, but Chinese, we actually value jade. And this is the topic of the day, Jade Suit. I'm very impressed by the collection of exhibits we have here. It's like, literally like a museum. The Jade Suit, I think we talked about a little bit about that a while ago. There's been around 12, there's about a dozen suits that's been discovered. There's actually more because during the Han Dynasty, the Jade Suit is actually very popular. The Han Dynasty is actually between 200 BC and 200 AD. These are, the Jade Suit is actually classified the same as the Egyptian mummies. It's supposed to preserve the body and bring you eternity in heaven and that sort of things. And as more tombs are discovered, they're finding more of these suits. But the one we have here is exceptional. The suit has about 2,500 pieces of jade that is actually weaved together. This one, I was told earlier, that has 4,000 pieces, so the workmanship is even more refined. It has about 2.5 pounds, that's about 40 ounces of gold. All the wire that is soldered together that actually go. The jade itself is nephrite, because at that time, nephrites are popular. But due to looting, and you can see some of the photos of that, because during the Han Dynasty, only the royal family can wear jade. More common people cannot wear jade. So they left the jade behind, only looted the gold. The first suit is actually discovered around 1960, so it's like 40, 50 years ago. And we are very honored to have one of these suits here. Other than preserving the body, it's actually also a symbol of status. If your suit is actually stitched together in gold, that means you're either king or royal family. The lesser princes or prince probably have a stitch in silver, but we have seen some that is stitched in copper and also stitched in silk threads as well. Now, other than Jade Suit, these are some of the common objects that has been seen around. The ones that we see here are mostly nephrite because of the bigger sizes of nephrite. It also have a more religious, plays a very important part in religious certificates. The Buddha, the Guan Yin, Happy Buddha, these are actually Chinese mystic images. The goddess of wealth, the goddess of happiness, the goddess of mercy. So you use this, we actually buy this and have them put in our sitting room or bedroom. And it's actually very popular for the Feng Shui purpose as well. Jadeite rarely make into sculptures like this because it would be utterly expensive. And also jadeite doesn't count as large as this. There are other objects that is commonly seen. Snuff bottle is actually very, very popular during Qing Dynasty. Snuff is the smashed tobacco that you intake through your nose. The seal, the paperweight is actually a symbol of power. Vases with flower. Also dragons, dragon motif are actually very common. Birds and trees that brings vitalities are also common objects. Now, the variety of jade. So I've been talking about nephrite and jade. And there's two types of jade. Both are classified as jade. In Chinese, jadeite we call hard jade, yan yu, and nephrite or soft jade. On the most scale, jadeite is about 7, and average, and the nephrite is averaging about 6.5. It's not that much difference in hardness, but the chemical composition is actually quite different. Due to the presence of sodium, aluminum, and other things, the color varies. Jadeite comes in green because there's more iron to it, and it basically comes in a whole spectrum of color, while the nephrite usually comes in white and palish green. During the old days, the white ones is considered most desirable, the mutton fat nephrite. Mutton fat, like the goat's fat, and it has a nice texture and it feels moist. Those are actually considered most desirable. So both are actually very, very valuable. For jadeite, it comes in a whole spectrum of color. Green is the most desirable. Lavender jade is also very desirable. And the intensity also determines the price. Then it comes to red jade, yellow jade, and even black jade. So you have a whole spectrum of color. So if someone comes up to you with a blackish stone, and say, is it jade? It's very likely that it can be jade because it comes in so many colors. These are all the colors that you find. Now, type of jade. And since the value of jade is so highly priced, there is always a lot of treatment for jade. In the market these days, we differentiate them into 3 types of jade. We have the jadeite. Now, type A jadeite. Type A jadeite actually means that it's untreated. It hasn't been dyed and it has been impregnated with any resin or any form of treatment. It's natural jade, 100% natural color, natural jade. And then you get the type B jadeite. Type jadeite has actually been treated or chemically bleached, and you impregnate it with resin for production. A lot of the jade in the market these days are actually from type B jade. Doesn't mean that it's cheaper. Type B jade can be quite expensive as well, and it actually depends on the quality of the treatment. And then you finally get type C jade that has been artificially colored. Now, my advice is that you want to buy a nice piece of jade. If we're talking about a high quality piece of jade, go to a more reputable store. They will offer you a certificate stating the authenticity of the jade. And also, if anything goes wrong, you can have the whole company back you up. Don't buy a piece of jade that's worth a lot of money in some silly little shops. And it can be, with naked eye, it's actually very, very difficult to tell. Especially type C jade, there's so many treatments these days that it has to be detected with different technologies, the ultra-red technology, the Chelsea filter, and they use a lot of chromium dye, and chromium dye is actually a heavy metal. So if you wear it all the time, your skin probably absorbs chromium, that is actually very bad for you. So you want to buy a nice piece of jade, go to a more reputable store. The certificate that they offer in Hong Kong, even GIA will offer you jade certificates, will state the type of jade that it is. The word that we look out for is resin. If there's no resin present, it's always a type A jade. When there's resin present, usually in this artificial coloring, then it's a C jade. So this is the type of treatment that you'll be seeing. The treatment is usually done on a nicer piece of jade. If you're going to buy a piece of jade that's paler or doesn't have a lot of color to it, it's very likely that it would be treated. There's no point treating it, and the effect is the same. Usually it's a high-end quality jade that's been treated. So, okay. Let's talk about the price of jade. Well, gold price is the value. It's like 1,300 US dollars an ounce. It's very much standard stuff. Diamonds has prices. The DIF diamond probably costs you about $20,000, a bit more. For jade, there's no price. You actually see a lot of jade in auctions. Sotheby's Christie, they have conducted a lot of auctions. The nicest piece of jade necklace, I think, that Christie's carried out was sold for like 20 million US dollars. So there's really no ceiling for the price of jade. But then it has a wide spectrum. You can buy a nice piece of jade for your grandchildren for something like $10 US. So the range is actually very, very big. But go to someone with the expertise of differentiating grade, differentiating jade, then you can see different values. They appreciate the value of jade. But then to determine the price of jade, these are the factors that contribute to the price. The color. These days, jade color, the greener, the better. But it has to be green in such a way it's more like a translucent apple green. We actually brought some for you to look at. We can have look at some of the products that we brought in the exhibition. It has to be translucent. Translucent in the sense that it's not clear like diamonds, but opaque, which means that it likely go through, but without actually going past it. So we can see a nice pale green to texture. We have a lot of terms for the texture. In Chinese, we have the glass type, ice type, watermelon, pea green, apple green. Different terms differentiate different texture of the jade. In the Western world, they don't differentiate it. The Chinese actually do have different terms. And the cutting, it's not a rule of thumb, but usually the bigger, the thicker it is, the better it is, because it actually feels better. That goes to the size and weights as well. Now, a lot of the carving is actually quite for feng shui purpose, a superstition, you may call it. But zodiac signs, the Chinese zodiac signs, are actually popular items for carving. The one on the top left is actually what we call Pixiu. It's one of the offsprings of dragons, and this you see in a lot of museums. You see it in front of the Bank of China, you see it in front of a lot of temples and royal palaces and other things. Those are meant to protect the household and actually scare away evil. We actually have objects like that in our store. You can use those stores and have a look at that later. But a lot of these animal shapes, carving, are actually found in burial grounds as well. Those are actually very, very common animals meant to protect you and also use as food and this sort of thing. The 12 zodiac sign, you can see a lot of those around in museums and so on. Now, variations of the jade teapots and cups. Those can be actually used during those days. People drink wine, people drink tea using those. You can see some lovely jade carving there, much more greenish jade. This is the cabbage. The cabbage, you will see more pictures of that later. The cabbage in Chinese is called sancai. Sancai sounds the same as bringing in wealth. So the cabbage is actually one of the most popular items for nephrite. And it can be quite big. It can be up to like 2 feet long. And also the tripod drinking vessel is actually a symbol of mortality during the older days. Those are actually very popular too. A lot of customers actually come up to me and say, "Oh, Mr. Chan, look at some of my jade. Is it real?" Well, my advice is that I can actually bring the gem back for you. But with naked eyes, sometimes it's actually quite difficult to tell whether it's authentic or not, because there's so many jade similars around. Serpentine, franite, which is pale green color, venturine quartz, venturine jade, chrysoberyl, this is Australian jade, and also a lot of other stones. It doesn't really matter whether it's authentic or not. If you like it, it's okay. But if you really want to find out whether it's authentic or not, normally there are pits on the surface of the jade. You can actually look at it with a loupe, and you can see the pits. Most of these stones here are one single crystal, so you don't have the pit. Because in the growing, the growth of little crystals. Having little pits on the jade is one of the characteristics of it. So it can be actually differentiated quite easily. But there are, again, very advanced instruments, infrared light, spectroscopes, and everything that can actually differentiate jade. Normally, the higher price jade, very green, good textured jade, will be sent to GIA labs for certificate. When you buy an expensive piece of jade, it usually comes with a certificate as well. So let's look at some of the gem quality jade. Look at the color of this. This is our old product, Lao Feng Xiang product. The necklace is actually, the beads necklace is actually priced for $25 million. This is in Shanghai at the moment. We couldn't bring it over here. We probably don't have a customer for it. We have to pay tax for it as well. But bangle is valued at $20 million. Yes, diamonds probably, you probably have diamonds that has got some capacity, but these are actually the best that you can see in the market these days. If you ever go to Shanghai, I recommend you to know my manager in Shanghai, and he will show you the items we have. But as you will notice, there's hardly any carvings on the bangles. Bangles are actually a very popular item. The thing about bangles is that it cannot be sized, it has to fit you perfectly. So if you like the bangle, it doesn't fit you, you can wear it, there's nothing we can do. So we have different sizes of bangles. But we cannot have different sizes of bangles for this type of gem quality. The whole thing is impure green, lovely texture, flawless, translucent. This is the best that money can buy. Now this is the other type of jewelry that you use. Smaller pieces, usually you cut them into little cabochons, which is like a dome shape, or into different varying shapes, and our designer will try to set it into diamonds and golds. These are more popular and affordable items. We have some of these in our stores. But if you go in any jewelry stores in Hong Kong, this is what is popular these days. So the same thing applies. You look at the shape, you look at the thickness, you look at the texture, you look at the color. But obviously a smaller piece will cost less than the whole necklace or whole piece. Not everything is in Shanghai. This is a lovely example of icy white jade. This is actually presently on show in our affiliate store. It's white jade. It's very translucent, it's white semi-rose gold with diamonds. And it doesn't really show in the texture, but it's very translucent. The whole thing is clear, it's flawless. We have a whole set of 4 items. You can actually go into our shop. Commercial. You can actually go into our shop and try this on and take a photo. How much is it? Correctly, is $80,000. For the whole set, yes. If you mention my name, I'll give you If you go back to cabbage, cabbage is one of the typical examples of FX carving because there are different styles. A lot of the workers, a lot of the crafters are actually very famous, like artists. Here you give them a brush and they paint. But in China, you give them a piece of jade and carve into different carvings. And also appreciate the wooden stands on the bottom. Those are actually they actually coexist with the jade. But sorry. Oh, this is very interesting. This looks like my favorite. It's a piece of, yes, it looks like a piece of pop, isn't it? But it's so unique because the surface, it looks like the skin, and the bottom part looks like it. So the craftsman is very creative. It created this piece. And this is symbol of oil. Oil is actually, it's greasy. But in Chinese, it actually means money. Jiao, yuan. So this is actually, couldn't resist putting it that way. Now, the cabbage. Because of the coexistence of the color, you can have a stem that is in white, and also have the leaves in green. So there's variations in cabbage in Taiwan, in China, even Hong Kong, you see a lot of cabbages around. Recently, in Shanghai, they are having the 16th, what's it called? It's called the International Annual Jade Culture Festival. And Lao Feng Xiang, this is from us. This is the whole creation. It's actually done by one of the national master craftsmen, Jiangsu, and it's on exhibits in Shanghai at the moment. This is actually quite substantial. It's about 2 feet big. I don't have a picture of the actual. Just one piece of jade. But look at the details of this. Look how delicate all the leaves and so on. So different workers have different styles. You see a few cabbages around.
These are
Handcrafted, yes.
No machine.
No machine. There are some that is done with machine, the cheaper versions. But all this is handcrafted. It takes years to do one of these. But the one machine, because there's always a risk of breaking it when you're doing it. So it's like carving on a piece of glass. This is jade. You look at the veins, look at the details of that. But we do have annual, we sponsor the annual jade carving exhibitions all the time. And we do have quite a few master grade, national grade crafters who craft things for us. So we've seen a lot of green jade, we've seen a lot of white jade. Then what is this? This is very different. It looks different. This is black jade, jet. Okay, wu cui. Now, as I said earlier, most jade are actually carved in such a way that it's thicker and bigger. They have a nice feel to it, which I should have. But this is something very unique. This is carved very thinly, very delicately. So with naked eye, with no optic light, it appears black. But once it's under the light, you can see the greenness in it. These are actually sliced very thinly. So when you put under light source, it appears green. It's very popular to use as goals and things. A lot of poems, a lot of stories have been emphasizing the use of jade goals. This is the type of jade that we use for utensils, for having dinner. And then this, lovely, so it looks like it's candy. This is lavender jade. So lavender jade, we do different chemical composition. The lavender, the color purple can be lighter, can be intense as this, but again, the intensity and the translucency of jade reduce the price. It comes in patents or that sort of things. These are the more common colors, the more popular colors that you see around. Okay, so that will come to the end of the introduction. I hope I didn't bore you too much. And if there's any question you'd like to ask about jade, my marketing manager is Xuzhou, my VP is here, and we will have to answer any of your questions. I can give some quick answers to a few questions, and we can look at some of your collections later. Any questions? Do you have any questions? You can have a look at that later, yes. But any basic questions about it? Yes, sir?
So the ancient jade that goes back thousands of years, that would all have come from Burma?
No, the Asian jade comes from China. Xinjiang is nephrite jade. Only the jadeite jade comes from Burma. Green jadeite jade only been popular for about 200 years. All the ones, the Asian jade, are usually nephrites.
And nephrite is discovered all over the world?
Nephrite is discovered all over the world, even in China itself. But Burmese jade, we don't have in China. But there are other places that have small production, but 70 productions are from Burma. Yes, ma'am?
Based on your map, it seems like there's no place in China actually
production is either done in...
I mean, the south is not in China anymore. The jade.
The jade.
No jade.
No jade in China. Jade. People have nephrites come from Xinjiang province, but we don't have jadeite. Fi cui. Fi cui doesn't come from China, usually imported into China and then crafted in China. So a lot of customers mistaken that, oh, the jade comes from China, it comes from China. It doesn't necessarily come from China. You can have the crafted work in China. Yeah, sorry. Yes, ma'am.
My mom used to say that if you wear the jade, it gets greener. What happens?
No, yes, it's true in certain ways. We say that to customers all the time. We're not lying to them. It does happen. The reason is that they're actually, jade is evidence many times. They're multi-crystalline. They're small crystals fused together. Okay? So when you cut them, it's like a sponge. So you have little pits in them. Even if you look at the microscope, little pits. So the more you rub them, during the old days, they found thumb pieces. I'm not sure if you can see them.
Yeah.
It's actually a thumb piece. You put a huge jade, put your thumb, rub it all the time. Yes, it does become green because chemicals from your body fills up those cracks. But nowadays, it's actually done by wax polishing. There is a certain amount. It will become clearer. It also become a little bit greener, but not to extent that you won't turn from white to green overnight. Just saying. Okay, thank you all for so. Yes, sir.
When someone carves a bangle,
Yes.
right, there must be a huge amount of jade that you take out of the middle to create, all right? So you have a lump of jade, you cut the shape, and then you take the bit out of the middle. So what happens to the bit in the middle?
Very good question, sir. Yeah, let's talk about bangles first. Because usually bangles, we have to slice in such a way. There's the thickness of the jade as well. So it really depending on the thickness of the jade that's sliced. Average size will be what we call something about 58 millimeters. That's the diameter of the jade bangle. So they will cut it in such a way that we will preserve the center part and have it crafted into a pendant. Okay? So usually we have the same texture of the pendant and the bangle. And it's actually a sales talk. We actually tell customers, oh, this pendant actually and the bangle come from the same piece of jade. You should buy a bangle yourself, buy a pendant for your mother. But yes, that's a very good question. We do try to preserve the center part. And even the little bit that comes out from the carving, probably have a saw off little pieces here and there. They probably try to carve in little beads and then strung it up together and make it into a jade bracelet. We try to maximize the yield. That's the most important thing. We've seen some miniature carvings. I don't know how they do it, but you can see carvings as small as this. It's very intricate. And yes.
Well, can I follow up on that? Presumably there's a certain amount of dust produced by cutting.
Yes, sir.
Now, if it's gold dust, you put it together and
Well,
it's still valuable. But jade dust?
You can't melt jade and turn it into a bigger piece of jade. You need a high pressure and also like thousands of years. We couldn't do that. So yes, it would go wasted. Yes, ma'am.
Where is most black jade from?
Most jade in various places. It actually depends on the chemical composition presence there, same as other places. But the black jade itself is noticeably more darker. The appearance is more darker. So when you carved out of the ground, you know right away that those are jet, called jet. So jade, yes, black jade is actually very popular for a certain amount of time. It's quite pricey as well for carvings or things. So you will wear a dark piece. People probably who are ignorant about jade probably won't know that it's jade. You put it out in the sunlight, it increases green. Those are actually quite popular as well. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Can you comment on how these artists are trained? How long does it take them to become skilled to carve the cabbage?
Now, I won't tell you the time, but the average working life of workers actually like 30 years. This is when you reach around 50, like my age, I will lose my sight this year. And you need, because of some of the intricate work, you need very specialized knives to work on the cabbage. But the famous workers, they carry on because they, instead of giving you 3 months to work a piece of jade, you can have 3 years to work a piece of jade, so they can take the time very slowly. But yes, you do have to train. The art of carving is actually big trade in China. Other than jade, there are a lot of other other carving as well, wood carving, even gold carvings. We have a nice collection of what we call gold wire workmanship in China. We specialize in sort of things. But yeah, if you're too young, you don't have the experience, and you don't have the fame to fetch a lot of money for your carvings. But when you reach a certain amount after gaining experience, you'll be too old to perform. So there's a dilemma there. But usually, if you reach a certain age and become famous, people will give you, will be more understanding, give you more time to work on a nice piece of jade. Yes, ma'am.
What happens if there's a slight scratch on the surface of a piece of jade? Would you recommend it to be taken to jewelry?
It really depends on the nature of the scratch. If it's not indented, then we can actually use some polishing machine, actually polish the surface off. It's a deep scratch, you can actually take it back to the refrigerator and have it repolished.
Which will reduce the size then?
Yes, but it doesn't matter, it's not like diamonds. I mean, if you get 1 carat diamonds and chip it and you polish it, it would be like 80 pointers. But you have a bangle that weighs like 300 grams, you polish it, probably like 298 grams, no big difference. You do re-polish your jade once in a while, but there's always a risk factor, because especially when you have the pieces that are set with claws and diamonds, when you take it out, we have to remove the prongs. There is a risk factor in that would break your jade. So unless it's home products, we really don't advise the customer doing that. But it's a bangle or it's just a normal piece of jade. You can bring it back to us.
Is there a reliable service here then in the United States for this?
Well, in the States, you can actually bring it to our store and see what we can do for you. But you probably have to either send it back to Hong Kong or send it to China. But it's always the risk factor.
Yeah, I know.
Break your jade and you say, oh, it's worth $20 million. So we will see what we can advise you to do. But
one thing, I've heard of terminology, but it's in Cantonese. It's called 出水. What does that mean?
出水 is actually waxing.
Oh, that's waxing?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not resin. So 出水 is very considered desirable.
Okay.
They actually put a layer of wax. They have a machine. They have like a cotton reel, and they put a little wax and they cut it and it becomes nice and shiny. So 出水
It is desirable.
Yes.
Because I noticed
It's
that,
done quite commonly.
yeah, in the auction houses, sometimes they will suggest, maybe, we can
Bring it
do
to
the sell it to 出水. I don't know
The
what
whole
it
time
means.
actually repolishing.
Okay.
They do soaking water and they're repolishing. But yeah, it's a common process.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
You said that if a wearer wears the jade for a long time and then you rub against it, the color can change to an apple green. But can it also change to any other color?
It depends on the nature of the jade. I'm not saying that it will definitely change. It's actually a myth. If people say, oh, your body is healthy, your secretion is healthy, the jade will change the color. It's not a dramatic change. It just appears better. And also, if all the cracks are filled because of the density of the jade, it actually appears more translucent. That's why it appears nicer in color. The color itself doesn't really change. You're not adding chemicals in it. It doesn't really change. It's just a condition of the jade. It becomes more translucent the more you wear it. So it appears greener.
Well, but if someone is, if a wearer was wearing apple green jade, and then the wearer for like decades, and then the wearer became sick, could that apple green jade change into like a
I
brown
doubt it. It only gets better.
Really?
Yeah, it only gets better. It will not change lighter unless it's dyed or treated. But natural jade, it won't get better. That's what we are taught to believe. But yes, I've seen jade grown in better color. But even if you are not healthy, I don't think we change color. They actually pass jade on to generations. 家传之宝, pass it, the treasure they pass it for generations. The mother-in-law gives to the newlywed wife, and gives to the old grandchildren as well. So a lot of jades are actually passed on for generations. Diamonds, no history of like not suddenly you don't give a diamond to your daughter-in-law. They buy their own bigger diamonds. But Jade actually would do that. Actually ask, it's a symbol. This is from your great-grandmother. Yes, sir. I think the answer to that is that it's very mythical to them. It's very mysterious. They don't know what they are. You know, give me a piece of greenstone. I have no idea what they are doing anything. But in China, we're brought up in a culture that is, oh, jade is the best. Jade is everything. Blah blah blah. Mother should give a piece of jade to the children, give a jade to your girlfriend, and other things. And in poems, the word jade, yu, is always mentioned. So we're brought up and say, oh, mother give you a piece of jade, good luck. So, oh, good luck, it's like a charm. So we were educated, we were brought up believing jade is meant to protect you, so square away evil. Not like a cross versus a vampire, or in that sense. but in a way that it protects square away unseen evil. You wear a bangle for a long time, and then you suddenly breaks it, or your wife breaks it. Instead of being sad, they feel happy because they felt that it's actually blocked something bad, something evil. And oh, it blocked something bad happened to me. If I didn't have the jade bangle, something bad would have happened to me. Bangle blocked it to me. So it's actually, they believed in that. Grew up in this sort of culture. But in the Western world, they're not. They're like gold, diamonds, but they sure have that. Chinese. But Western culture is becoming more popular. There are a lot of customers, even in Hong Kong, that are buying a lot of jade because the price has gone up for the last decades. Almost 10 times, a lot of gem quality jade. See, every year the auction price is very high. But as I said, not all jade are expensive. You can get some nice $100 piece of jade, and you can wear green, nice texture, but not gem quality, but still genuine jade. Yes, sir.
So how's the jadeite deposit right now? Like how
I beg
long do
pardon?
you think, like the jadeite deposit, like how long do you think it's gonna last?
Well, we don't know how long it's going to last. Well, you see, for diamonds, you have De Beers. There's actually quite a lot of diamond deposit worldwide. It's just that they're controlling the production, like oil prices, like Apex oil prices. If there's too much in the market, they produce less. If it's not enough, they produce more. Same with jadeite. We don't know how much more jadeite deposit there right now, but I think there should be quite a few more years that we can see gem quality jade. But in Hong Kong, they're doing that. In Jiangsu, I'm not sure you've been to Hong Kong, but in Jiangsu every morning, like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, it's very active that people will trade jade in Jiangsu, in Canton Road, where the jade market is. But the jade market is also a tourist area. And people sell you a piece of jade, it's worth $10 for $2,000. So unless you know jade, you're to this tourist scam. Come along. Yes, ma'am.
I would like to ask you for the craftsmanship.
The craftsmanship.
Is progressing from ancient time, or actually some craftsmanship maybe actually lost. I just later said.
You're saying the craftsmanship will be lost?
I mean, there's sometimes certain craftsmanship because
There are actually, because a lot of the carvings that you see in museums, nobody can make them anymore. The younger generation probably don't want to learn because it's very difficult. It's a lot of hard work. It's very, very hard. It's painful for your fingers. The educated ones want to be bankers rather than jewelry. So yes, we are having less and less, even for us, Lao Feng Xiang, we are having less and less younger generation wanting to be craftsmen. Eventually, I don't know, but yes, it's good workers are getting scarcer and scarcer. Those with creativity, skills to work on a big piece of jade, or also sort of other things. It's getting difficult.
certain things you wouldn't clear. For craftsmanship is so good.
Yes.
But we live in industrialized world, so certain craftsmanship doesn't disappear.
Well, unless you do it by machines, which a lady was telling me, but it's very difficult to work with machines because the machine probably generates same designs all the time. So this has to be handmade. You look closely, every single leaf is different, and try to mimic natural cabbage or natural whatever as closely as possible. So that takes a great degree of experience and expertise on such matter.
So the ancient time quality is better than right now.
Most jade carvings are from Asia, not just Asia.
Sorry, I don't mean in Asia, I mean Asian.
Ancient.
I mean,
Ancient.
Yeah, antiquity. So the older one is always better than right now.
Older ones because, I think the new ones are also quite good. Like the one I showed you in the exhibition, it's been renowned. A lot of people say, oh, best in the country, war, national treasure. Different. It's like paintings. It's very difficult to say Picasso is better or Monet is better. So it's different style. Modern and modern style, older style. Appreciate in such a way there's like an art. So some of this is very lively, this one is very delicate. So every craftsman has their own style and characteristics. Okay, thank you very much.